Hey everybody, it's me Turtle, and today we're going to ride the 2014 Tiger 800 XC. Triumph has released a lot of models of this bike. They have the XR, which is for the road, and the XC, which has these spoke tires and is much more oriented for going off-road. What's cool about this Tiger is the fact that it is a 3-cylinder, which means that it sounds really cool. You can hear that kind of like almost wheezing noise that the 3-cylinder makes, and it's addictive. This bike is a lot different than my Ninja 650, obviously. The seating position on this bike is literally vertical. I feel like I'm sitting on a sofa. I was fortunate enough to ride the 2016 XRT, which is the top of the line XR. The XRT, I think in either 2015 or 2016, they got rid of the cable for the throttle and replaced it with an electronic throttle. I really like the way that the XRT handled. However, I didn't really like the way it looked. I didn't like the fact that it was missing the beak. I feel like the beak is what makes the Tiger 800 awesome. Anyway, so let's talk about some more differences between the XC and the XR. The XC has a much lower first gear, and it's kind of apparent because the XC really wants you to be off-road. So that first gear has a lot more pull. It's much shorter. What I liked a lot about the XR is that it felt like my bike. It felt like my bike, except it was just bigger and more upright, surprisingly. Actually, I was really surprised that it handled like my bike. What's cool about this XC is that I don't really have to shift too much. If I wind up in second gear, then I'm in second gear. What I like about this bike is definitely the ergonomics. The seat has adjustments on the front and on the back, so you could raise and lower either aspect of the bike. The windscreen on this bike is so good at getting the wind off of my face that I feel no buffeting at all on my helmet. In fact, it's so good that it doesn't let any wind get into my helmet, and I feel like I'm melting a little bit. Speaking of melting, there's one thing I really don't like about this bike. And it wasn't apparent at first, but after riding it now for, I don't know, I want to say close to 200 miles, there's some strange heat dissipation. It seems as if the engine just doesn't dissipate the heat properly or something. Like the fairings aren't doing their job. When I rest my leg up in here, I can feel the heat of the engine. It gets really hot. Like it gets the inside of my knees pretty warm. The transmission on this bike is fantastic. The clutch is quick and crisp. The transmission is very responsive. When you get into whatever gear you need to be in, you know. And it isn't that big of a struggle either. It's not very hard to notchy. I guess the transmission isn't really notchy, and it's not squishy either. You can really feel when you get into whatever gear you want to go into. Right here on the inside of my knee, it's as if they're missing a fairing or something. Something's missing there. Another thing that I've noticed with this bike is that it is very smooth. The 3 cylinders really balance things out. When this bike leans, it's very top heavy. The center of gravity is way up, like right by my crotch. The Ninja that I ride has a very low center of gravity. I feel like it's below the bike, and when I lean, it feels very planted. This bike, when it leans and it starts to go over, it really wants to go over, just because of how top heavy it is. The bike has also a lot of power too. I'm noticing that it's also a very linear kind of progression when it comes to the power band of the bike. There isn't a sudden surge at any RPM. It just kind of does what it needs to do through the whole gear. The engine braking is phenomenal. Not too much, not too little. I love the way this bike sounds. This is a stock exhaust. If this had the Aero exhaust, it would sound really cool too. I'm noticing that this bike also gets a lot of looks. Now, I don't know if it's just because of my getup and the way that the Icon gear that I wear looks, or if it's both the Icon gear and the awesomeness of this bike. I've seen people bring this bike to the racetrack and actually track this bike going like $120 around corners. I don't know how people do it. Those are some pretty good riders. I love days like today where I rode in my 650 to work and had the sport bike experience, and now I can ride this thing around and have the adventure experience. Actually, you know what, come to think of it, I don't know why people would ever get a cruiser if you can get this thing. I feel like it's way more comfortable, way more capable. I mean, this bike is like made for the apocalypse. It is completely off-road ready. It is comfortable. It gets good gas mileage. It's fast as hell. Yeah, I don't know why you would pick another bike. Maybe the Tiger Explorer 1200 if you wanted a bigger engine for whatever reason. But this is just great. The 3-cylinder is just fantastic. That downshift feels so good on this bike. The throttle is very responsive on this bike. Even though it's a cable throttle, it's still very, very responsive. I think it's because of just the size of the engine and the fact that it's a triple. It really blips really well. Oh, it's so good. So good. I love the transmission on this bike. I think that's just the thing that sells me. I would buy this bike if I was gonna go and cruise across the entire country. Absolutely. This is the bike for that. I feel like doing 60, 70 miles an hour on this bike is nothing with this windscreen. If you're considering buying a cruiser, don't. Just ride this first. Ride this first and then decide. Because I feel like if you ride this first, you're just not gonna do it. You're just gonna come back, you're gonna visit Triumph, and you're just going to buy this bike. So I went to a Triumph BMW dealership, and this dealership was selling the BMW GS 800 and the Tiger 800. The Tiger 800 looks awesome. But not only that, but the engine on this bike is so good that every time people go in to buy the GS 800 or the F800, whatever they call it, they ride that bike, then they ride this bike, they almost always pick the Tiger 800. It is that awesome of an engine. Overall, this Tiger is sweet. I really do feel like I'm just sitting on the back of a big cat, just like as it runs through the forest. It's just taking me along for a ride.
Hey everybody, it's me Toe, and today what we're going to talk about is engine braking. The Tiger 800 XC is phenomenal engine braking. In fact, it's phenomenal everything. The gearbox, everything on this bike is fantastic, and I could vouch for it myself. I could see myself taking this bike to the end of the world and back. I mean, it's literally created to take on the entirety of the apocalypse. Not just the first day of the apocalypse, not the second, not the third, not the first year, but the 50th year of the apocalypse. This bike is still going to be out. It's still going to be riding. It's still going to be out on its hunting grounds, ready to pounce on the latest and greatest trail. The Triumph Tiger 800. It's a great bike. You should buy one.